a glimpse of our true nature is not going to be the thing that overrides the actual factual conditioning that you're experiencing a separate world, that you're experiencing objects outside of yourself, that you experience your consciousness to be inside the body, that you experience your thoughts to take place in your head and your consciousness takes place in your head and you experience an outside world. This is something that is a very necessary thing to dissolve because it's not true. So if you've come to this video and you're curious about expanding your consciousness, I would suggest to revert away from expanding, revert away from growing, getting better, improving, and to start to desire to seek the truth of your experience. Any true spiritual seeker is going to ultimately want that above all else. And it gets to a stage where we have to stop the desire to end suffering, which is kind of paradoxical. It's why I started the approach and this path in the first place. But it's true. We can't ever end suffering with the desire to end it. Because the desire to end it is itself made of suffering. Therefore, the desire to end it is suffering. What we do to purify that desire is we learn to seek the truth of experience. In learning to seek the truth of experience and making that the primary desire, we purify the desire. And when we purify the desire, we're no longer resisting experience to try and end suffering. So when I talk about dissolving the distance between ourself and the world, what I'm really referring to is essentially what we could call non-duality. And most people are probably watching this are very familiar with non-duality, but I'm trying to make this a more tangible explanation for people who may have never heard of it before. And non-duality is simply a description of reality, the fact that reality isn't two. So what we can do right now is I can take you on a very simple exploration that can give you some type of insight into non-dual experience. Now, I want you to, in this moment, just recognize yourself as being aware. You are obviously aware in this moment. And I want you to notice the two facts of experience. If we were to take everything else away, the fact number one is that you exist and you are aware of your own existence. Fact number two, there is an experience. Now, we don't want to put labels on what these things are. All we know is that we exist and that experience exists. Now, the cause of suffering is literally in the belief. And not just the belief, but the conditioning that is imposed by that belief of being temporary, limited and finite and inside the body, experiencing a separate world outside of us. And the reason for that is because this distance causes resistance. And resistance is what I've said a billion times, causes suffering. It is what suffering is. So what I want you to do right now is to go to the raw aspect of being alive. You're alive in this moment. If I was to ask you, you are alive. I want you to ask yourself if that aliveness is real. In other words, is it false? Are you actually not alive, but you think you are? Obviously you are alive and you are real, therefore you do exist by nature of being able to understand the question. So the next step would be does the world exist? Is there a reality to the world? Is something there even if you don't know what that something is? The answer would be, well, yes, something is there if you're having a similar experience to me, but I'm not quite sure what it is. So what we can say about experience is that even if we don't know what it is, we know that it is. And even if we don't know what we are, we know that we are. And the best way to inevitably do this is to look for the distance between you and the world. And in order to find the distance between ourselves and the world, we have to first recognize what it actually is that we are on a fundamental level. So we're obviously not a brain, we're obviously not a hand, we're obviously not an eyeball. If we were to go to our experience, having removed every concept from it, all we know of ourselves is that we are experiencing. And this experiencingness, what qualities are there to that experience? We would say that there's sights, smells, touches, tastes, sounds. And we could group these entire sense faculties by simply, they're all perceptions. And if we were to take every single perception, like if we were to take the experience of sound, we're always going to find that the sound is the experience of hearing. And what is there to the experience of hearing? We notice that there is no tangible experience to hearing apart from the fact of hearing and being aware of it. So we can take this pathway to notice that, okay, well, the experience of hearing is actually just being. The experience of hearing is me being aware that there is the experience of hearing. And we can go closer in on ourselves and we can say, is there anything else to myself other than being, other than knowing? We could say, well, I have thoughts. But we could argue that the thoughts themselves are obviously not aware. The thoughts don't know themselves. We experience the thinking. So if we experience the thinking, then we're obviously not the thinking process. We could say we're the body, but notice that the body itself, just like the sound experience, is just simply sensation. The body is a sensation. If you take your sight away, there's no experience of a body. There's just this experience of sensation. And we know that sensation is just another faculty of the mind. So all there is to experience is this faculty of perception. And then we could say the thought, even the thought itself, is some form of perception, some internal perception. And what is there to that experience of the thought? It would simply be the knowing of it. There's nothing else you can add or take away. There's nothing else there. Now notice the minute that you think a thought. Take the thought breath or breathe. The minute you say the be, you're aware of it. There's just pure knowing the whole way through. Starts with be, ends with ease. Notice that you are there prior to the thought. You're there in the thought and you're there after the thought. There's a pure knowing experience even in the midst of the thought. And notice that that which is aware of the thought is your being. It's you. It's awareness. Now notice that this thought is arising in awareness in the same likeness to a wave arising from the ocean. A wave arises from the ocean, it goes back into the ocean. A thought rises in consciousness, it dissolves back into consciousness. In the same way that we make a sound in physical form, we contract air. We contract air, a localization of air, and that creates the vibration that we call sound. Likewise, in a thought, we contract a localization of consciousness, we vibrate it within ourselves, and we experience it from a second person point of view that we call thinking. But if we look at the thought itself, it's not made of anything else other than awareness. So now we've established that if you look at that, can you try and distinguish awareness from the thought? Can you take the thought away from awareness? And can you take awareness away from the thought? You can't do that. If you pause the video for a minute and try to do that, you can't do that. So we see that if we are awareness, we are not separable from the thought. Thinking is made of awareness. So we already know that thinking is an experience made of ourself. Now, if we were to take the experience of hearing, we go back into experience now and we recognize that the hearing experience, that's simply another experience that arises in awareness and dissolves back into awareness. Now, don't think of the sound. You may be thinking, oh, but I hear the sound over there at a distance. Even the perception of distance is another perception arising in the empty space of being, of awareness. So this seeming distance is another perception. So just go to the experience of hearing. Don't label where it is or what it is. Just this experience of hearing. Notice that there is nothing else to it, just like the thought. If you look at it clearly, there's nothing else to it. And you notice that this experience of hearing is just raw knowing, raw perceiving, and perceiving is just raw knowing. You can't take the perception away from awareness, and you can't take awareness away from the perception. They're intimately one. Now, if you are awareness, if by experience you know yourself to be aware, could you be anything else? Pause the video and discover that you can't be anything else other than aware. And if a perception can't be anything else other than aware, a thought can't be anything else other than aware, gradually we start seeing the entirety of experience is made of a localization of our own mind, experienced by awareness, made of awareness. Therefore, we eventually become to the point where there are no objects independent from awareness. There's just awareness. Every sight, every sound, every sensation, it's made of the knowing of it. It's made of awareness. Now, this is an experience. This is a pathway that we can take to, we call it the direct path. And it's a pathway that we can take to non-duality. And it's a pathway that we can take to bridge the gap between our distance between ourselves and the world. So it's very important that we are scrutinizing, if that's the right word. It's very important that we are very, very serious about what is actually true to our experience. Not what we've read in a book, not what somebody's told us, not what science has taught us. True to our actual experience, trusting ourselves, trusting our own experience, which we have to see ourselves as the leading authority on that. We can't see somebody else as the leading authority on that. We have to come to a stage at some point where we trust our own direct experience, not what a guy is saying on a YouTube video. I take people through these kinds of explorations 4 times a week for free in my private community. And this is where you can learn this process properly and actually integrate this into your experience. It is the end of suffering. It's a pathway to the end of suffering. That's the purpose of it. Unconditional happiness. A true expanded consciousness is really just a mind that has dissolved in itself. Remembering that the mind is made of awareness. When the mind takes the pathway in itself and dissolves, that's what we could call, if anything's expanded consciousness, it's going to be that. And that isn't an expanded consciousness. That's the recognition of the expanseless, spaceless, timeless presence of pure awareness. That would be an approach that I would suggest. We're riding the wave of thought. We're riding the waves of experience into the ocean of awareness, or riding the waves of experience into the ocean of being. So the path is simple. We take the step in and then we take the step out. And the step within is to recognize the nature, and the step without is not really without. The step without is really when we truly go within, we never come back out. All the out exploration is really the beginning of the internal exploration. So that's what I suggest. If you want this type of guidance, you want this type of experiments, I can take you through that 4 times a week, like I said, in my community. The link's in the description. If you found value in this video, if you want to subscribe, if you liked it, leave a like, leave a subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you soon. Take care.